Leeds, Leeds, Leeds. What is happening? Welcome to Series 7 of Working Hours, an oral history podcast about a place called Leeds, a time called now, and an activity called work. Working Hours is trying to interview 200 loiners, that's people from Leeds, over the first half of the most important decade in the history of the human species and ask them about what they do all day and hear how they feel about it. My name is Simon, and this is all my fault. My mission for this podcast is to try to capture just some of what my city, Leeds, a city that has declared a climate emergency, is doing during humanity's biggest emergencies. On Working Hours, you hear how loiners have, are, and will be coping with our multiple and expanding crises during their day-to-day working hours. To tell this story, I need loiners like you, dear listener. I need people in Leeds or people from Leeds to come on this podcast and tell me about what they do all day and let me record how this decade affects our work. Thank you for listening to this episode.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
I actually really wanted to be a teacher. I really wanted to be a teacher, right from really quite little. And when I was sort of 14 to 18, I had a really good side gig doing private tutoring. So for local kids, a family of Jordanians, and so I'd go twice a week and do extra classes with the kids after school, and I had had about 12 pupils altogether. So I mainly sort of pre-high school or first couple of years of high school. So I really enjoyed that. So that was definitely what I wanted to be.
Did you have a particular subject in mind, or was there a particular teacher ideal in your mind? What was the model for you?
I think was as I think so many people, having really inspiring teachers, well, really awful teachers as well, but a few really inspiring teachers. And I think just that sense of sharing and learning together, which I suppose is really what I'm doing now. Although I'm not teaching, I'm more coaching and facilitating now. And the only reason I didn't apply to do teaching at university was because, rather sort of shamefully, I realised that I really only wanted to be with people who wanted to learn. Even if I had lots of the people I work with and I supported were dyslexic or had learning difficulties or had other disabilities. So it wasn't about only being bright. It was about wanting to learn. And you can't be a teacher if you only want to work with people who want to learn. You have to have everybody and inspire everybody. And it was a bit of a shameful realisation, but I thought, actually, that's not a good teacher. That's not a classroom teacher. So I decided not to pursue that.
You're listening to Series 7, Episode 3, and to my guest, Liza Kellett. This is another Squadcast recorded on the 8th of April, 2026. Hello, colleague. So, before we get into this, I have 3 notifications for you. Number 1, Chris Smalls is amazing and Jeffrey Kisses sucks. If you don't know who Chris Smalls is, go and find out. Number 2, if you're listening to this and you haven't read the brilliant review of Working Hours by Tal Gur on elevatesociety.com, then I highly recommend that you do. The link is in the show notes. See, he gets it. If I'd done this in Manchester, I'd be smashing it. Bet they're up for being on a podcast. Anyway, number 3, the Working Class History podcast has just done a 3-parter on the 1926 general strike that I've not listened to yet, but I'm very much looking forward to. Tell me what it's like if you've heard it. This episode was supposed to come out on May Day, but I read that review and it was great, so I rewarded myself with the afternoon off instead of spending most of the day editing, and then I just lost momentum on doing editing work for free. Anyway, it's here now, and the next one will follow shortly, so stay tuned to the socials for when that drops. Liza Kellett is the founding chief executive of social enterprise Trust Leeds and was awarded the Yorkshire and Humberside Social Entrepreneur of the Year in 2025. Liza has set up, led, managed, funded and advised charities and social enterprises in the capacities of Chief Executive of social enterprise Emmaus Leeds, for which she raised over £3 million in investment to enable it to sustainably generate half of its income. Chief Executive of the Community Fund Wales, where she created Wales' first micro-venture philanthropy fund, the world's first national community endowment fund, and an annual philanthropy week. Panellist on multiple grant funds and social enterprise loan funds, and trustee of several trading charities. In addition to strategic, governance, leadership and business management, Liza has lived experience of walking alongside people facing poverty, isolation and financial exclusion. She nurtures energy, ambition and a sense of purpose and belonging by bringing a unique combination of global models of self-reliant groups and microfinance to Leeds. Liza cheers when she sees that a potential borrower has poor credit record, having listened to their business ideas, successes and failures, their lack of a formal business plan when they absolutely know their market, competitors, USP, risks, SWOT and finances, their experience of being turned down for funding by banks and credit unions, and their mental and physical health issues. Liza knows that Trust Leeds can trust them with a small loan to get their business going or growing. Liza Kellett has guest lectured on social enterprise leadership at Leeds University Business School, where she regularly gives talks and presentations as a leader in residence. She also sits on the Leeds City Council Financial Inclusion Steering Group. Her ambition is to exponentially increase the impact of Trust Leeds microfinance enterprise through a social franchising/free share model. Right, let's do this. Episode 194 of Working Hours with Liza Kellett.
So, what are you doing now?
So now I'm the founding chief exec of a tiny charity called Trust Leeds.
Why did you pick CEO?
I think it's a sort of charity structure, the sort of the founding person, and I mean, even though it's really tiny, and at many times I've been the only member of staff. I think because my history as being a chief exec, so it just felt like that role, that leadership role, that strategic role, building partnerships, building a new organisation and developing it so that they're all very consistent with the role of chief exec in the charity sector, and I imagine in the private and public sectors as well. So that's why I chose that title. But of course, we're a charity, and the charity is a well-regulated, well-structured, honed since pre-Victorian times organisational structure, which has lots of checks and balances, and a organisational structure which is about helping people. It's about making an impact. And despite being the founding chief exec, the structure that I chose along with my advisors as a charity meant that we benefited from having a board of trustees, company directors who are also trustees. And so there's always a we with Trust Leeds. It's a we, it's an organisation. So it's a big funnel. We've got 8 trustees and then sometimes one member of staff. I've got 3 people who work various hours for me at the moment. But that charity structure really lent itself to the mission and the purpose of our organisation, and to positioning ourselves. Yes, we have a sort of social enterprise element, but it's all about helping people and moving things on and improving lives. So the charity structure was really important to choose that model. And the purpose really is to bring the sort of global models of self-reliant groups and microfinance to Leeds. And these are very well tried and tested models. The grandfather was Muhammad Yunus, who eventually was awarded a Nobel Prize for his work in microfinance. He used to work for the World Bank, he used to be an economics professor at Chittagong University, and is now leader, some political leader of Bangladesh or advisor to Bangladesh, been imprisoned for his work, been given a Nobel Peace Prize for his work, and is called the grandfather of microfinance, really. So he established this concept of microfinance and self-reliant groups in Bangladesh in the 80s. And so that model grew very quickly in Bangladesh and India, and was very well regarded in terms of development of women and economic power, social enterprise kind of model. But it stayed very much within India and Bangladesh for a while, until it became recognised as a model for economic development. Again, mainly in what we used to call developing nations, where there's no welfare state. So his beginnings as an economics professor was taking some of his students literally down the hill to the slums in Chittagong to try to understand why there were so many women in these slums working, making matchboxes or rush mats, but never seemed to have any money. They were working all the time. And one of the reasons was because they were having to borrow the money to buy the raw materials and pay the interest, and they were never able to get ahead of things. So
it's always debt.
It really is. Well, debt and confidence, I think. So he, as an experiment, gave a few dollars to a group of women and said, well, if you work together and support each other, I will lend you this money, and you take the shared responsibility for paying it back once you've been able to generate some income of your own. And that very simple experiment very successfully grew into this models of self-help, self-reliant groups with microfinance. And, he's set up banks, the Grameen Bank, the bank he's called the Banker to the Poor, mobile phone networks. My sister and nephew, who've been in Bangladesh, lived in Bangladesh for a while, say you can spot a Grameen house, you can spot a Grameen telephone. So he, is a real pioneer and sort of thought leader in terms of development, women's development, economic development, individual development, self-employment. And so that model, very simple model of a bunch of women getting together, saving, sharing, learning, supporting each other, doing something entrepreneurial, is one that a former Catholic priest in Glasgow was aware of, because he's originally from India, and he worked with the Church of Scotland to set up a small charity called Revolution to look at that model, those two models really, self-reliant groups and microfinance, and see whether they could be part of the solution for addressing multi-generational long-term worklessness and lack of hope and lack of purpose. So he brought those models to Glasgow and inspired somebody in Wales who I knew when I was working in Wales. And so the two of them, and then I was a bit of a Johnny-come-lately, as an early adopter, decided that we were going to, all in our own geographies, use these simple models and see whether introducing something that hadn't been heard of before into the ecology, into the community, into the charity sector would add value and would offer alternative ways of thinking, ways of doing things, ways of enterprising. And so that was all the genesis really of Trust Leeds. So we had this inspiring pioneer in Glasgow and a woman in Wales who ran Purple Shoots, which is a charity, who was also doing microfinance and the self-reliant groups. And then we got together and shared learning and support and developed these models in our own geographies, similar models but some distinct characteristics, all with a view to introducing this way of thinking, this way of working, this way of enterprising. Because there was a gap and it was needed, and all three of us have been able to position self-reliant groups and microfinance in our geographies. For me, it's Leeds, and more broadly West Yorkshire, as something that is valued, that is needed, that is complementing existing provision, not competing with it. and really helps people to enterprise their way to a better future.
So, I mean, the first thing I'm thinking of there is financial regs. So, how much do you need to be regulated? Are you slightly less regulated because smaller numbers and your charity, or?
No, it's really interesting. Obviously, we have the Charity Commission, which is a regulator, but a very guiding regulator, and a regulator with a lot of experience to share and a lot of very good information to share. So our community self-reliant groups are very much about members of one community of geography, need or interest getting together with and us facilitating them to develop their own self-reliant group and go off and do their own things. And then the other program that we have is Be Your Own Boss, which is the sort of next step up for people who are thinking of turning a hobby into business, or who are maybe long-term unemployed or been declared unfit for work, that horrible expression, but who are able to earn £20 a week on top of their benefits, for example. And other people who are thinking of becoming their own boss, becoming self-employed, setting up their own company. So we developed a 12-week program called Be Your Own Boss, which is run online, and it's getting to grips with all the basics of setting up on your own for people who wouldn't join the Chamber of Commerce, for people that wouldn't access startup business support that there is, but wouldn't feel comfortable with doing that, or probably wouldn't be able to find it. And so we filled a real niche there in what we call kitchen table entrepreneurs. And then the microfinance was the third element that we brought online. And you're absolutely right, it's a highly regulated industry and sector rather. And the Financial Conduct Authority is our regulator, and I'm only just being able to say FCA without the other F word in front, because it took a long time. They have they've at a time when companies like Wonga were people were realising their practices were not acceptable, and the FCA was bringing in new regulations to deal with financial abuse, basically, and poor financial promotion, and disregarding people's lack of information and understanding about debt. So it was a time when we were setting up Trust Leeds when regulations were becoming much stricter, much firmer, much fairer. But of course, a Consumer Credit Act and consumer credit providers, we are so one end of the spectrum, like tiny. And of course, the FCA had never really met anybody like us before. Revolution and Purple Shoots, the pioneers who were helping us to develop our model here, had been regulated in a different regime. And when it came to us becoming regulated, the process was much deeper, much more involved, much tougher. Again, all to protect consumers, of course. But there's no proportionality. No proportionality at all. So whether you're setting up a multi-billion-pound consumer credit company or a charity that is, ultimate ambition is that we make 24 loans over £1,000 a year, you still have to have a anti-money laundering officer, and you still have to have money laundering training, and you still have to have all of the policies and protocols and procedures in place. So absolutely no proportionality at all. It's a monster. And it took a couple of years, and there's a trade association for community development financial institutions called Responsible Finance. And there's about 40 CDFIs in the UK, and we joined that. But again, we're really unusual, we're really quirky. And although we have these two pioneer organisations to emulate, we are doing it very differently from them. So, and even though we have a trade association, so we're completely barking according to them. So it was tough, but we had a good constellation of allies around us. A wonderful lawyer at Capital Law who did I don't know how much work pro bono before. I got a tiny grant to help pay them some money, but basically it was a lot of work. And in fact, one of the biggest ambitions that Trust Leeds has, or that I have as the leader of Trust Leeds, is that we grow our impact. across the UK, not by becoming Trust UK, but by sharing our model with other people. We've done all the hard work, the business plan, the 42 different policies and procedures, the loan management system, the anti-money laundering training, all of those things, and actually encouraging other people to operate very, very small microfinance projects, which are so needed, especially at our scale, locally, by free sharing our intellectual property, our policies, our protocols, and encouraging them and using our experience and a little bit of expertise that we've developed along the way to encourage them to register and to with the FCA and to replicate this model in their own communities, whether that be, a retired bank manager from Morecambe who's saying, if she's saying, I'm retiring early, I'd like to do something else, or a super church in Manchester, or a community anchor organisation in Wakefield, trying to make this model, this structure achievable for them by packaging it all up in a way that they can get to speed really quickly. They'll have to reinvent the wheel for themselves, but that's the idea, because actually, there's not thousands and thousands of people in Leeds or across West Yorkshire who are in a position that need our kind of loans. It's quite specific. It has to be for people who we can only lend as a charity to people who've had who've had wobbles. What the charity calls are facing poverty and financial exclusion. We can only lend to people who have been turned down for elsewhere or aren't able to apply elsewhere. So it's quite a specific, and they have to be people who have a good business idea. They won't necessarily have to have a big business plan, but they need to know their stuff. So we're in our second year of lending. It's going very well. We've made 18 loans now, and our ambition is to build up to 24 loans a year and probably keep it at that. 24 loans, £1,000. That's where nobody else is lending. There's no other opportunity for people like that. And then help other people to set up their own mini microfinance programs in their areas. So that's our growth ambition there. But the Financial Conduct Authority, quite right that we are regulated, because consumer credit has had its sort of outlaw days, and that's coming to an end. But it's, I have had several conversations with them, and they're open to discussions about how we can make the process of registration lighter. Because one size fits all. And I made this hilarious mistake on one of my FCA returns. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I'll tell you. One of the forms, you have to fill in quarterly returns and how many loans you've made and how much working capital you've got and things like that. And one of the forms was really long, and at the top it's got in thousands. So your answer should be in thousands. So when it said, how many loans have you made? I put 30. Or how many, I think it was how many loans, I can't remember how many expressions of interest or something like that. I put 30. And so I got this email a few weeks later saying, you need to be regulated differently. You're on a much bigger scale than we thought you were. Or are you? Did you perhaps make a little mistake then? I thought, oh, how embarrassing. So, they're used to that kind of scale, 30 million, and we're talking 30. We're talking, what was your loan book? And our loan book was £6,000 or something. We had 6 loans out at that time. And I'd put 6, and they thought it was 600,000, so it's just 6,000 loans. So, I think there has to be some kind of proportionality, but I can see why it's difficult for them to make it proportionate, because, ultimately the consumer does need protecting. So as we learn and as we grow, we're thinking about ways that we can suggest to them that they might lighten up a little bit, but their objectives are pure in terms of protecting the consumer, and their processes are, I find, a little bit scary, and because I'm not a banker, I'm so not a banker. But actually, it's a good system, but it's too much, and I think that's a barrier to other people picking up the model is FCA regulation. But if I can make that easier by sharing our experience and our policies and our protocols and our loan management book and system and things like that, then I think other people will, especially people who've got a background in banking. Like, I say retired bank managers, there are a lot of retired bank managers around who are really committed to doing social good, and they've got that mindset. a slightly anarchy mindset or a geeky mindset that doesn't get spooked by these kind of policies and protocols and figures. So my ambition, or our ambition, is that we encourage other people to do that. And, we're not training them, we're not licensing to them, we're not social franchising. It has to be something that they want to do, and we can give them the basic toolkit and then be an ally for them. So that's the big plan for growth.
So how does somebody come to you then? Is it through referral or
For our borrowers. So we're a bit careful at the moment about advertising, and we're just kind of on the cusp, because having set that target of 12 to 24 loans per year, so one loan a month, up to £1,000, 6% interest, 10.89% APR, payable back in 12 monthly instalments, we need to make sure that we're targeting people who A, need the loan rather than could just borrow it from their whoever, B, need the loan because they have faced financial exclusion or they're struggling financially, and also have a business that is consistent with what we do. £1,000 is going to make a really big difference. So our classic borrower would be somebody who's, for example, we have someone who had worked in a salon before, and she wanted to set up her own makeup business from her front room. And she needed a loan to pay for insurance, to redecorate and, buy a workstation and some materials to set up. She had been unemployed previously and had sort of various employments and didn't have great mental health, so hadn't been able to sustain long term, but felt that she could manage a small low-key business, working from home, family and friends and more people. So we promote our lending through the network of business startup advisors. So the council and the combined authority have business startup managers, and so they meet people from our makeup person to somebody who wants to set up a high growth potential chemical business. So they really like what we're doing, and they've begun to signpost people to us. And of course, because in our community self-reliant groups and in our Be Our Own Boss programs, we meet people who have solid little business ideas and for whom £50, £500, £1,000 would make a real difference. Our work over the last 6 years has created a pipeline of borrowers as well. So that's really how we find people. The library as well. I mean, Leeds City Library has a wonderful business and IP centre, and they are really happy. They have our material there, and we get quite a few people who go to the library to try to find out about how do I become self-employed, or how do I research the business of candle making, and they very kindly signpost people. So that's how we're getting people at the moment, through our own programmes, through the business advisors, through the libraries. And now it's a bit broader through our constellation of allies and the members that we've supported. I mean, we've done 11 Be Your Own Boss programs. We've had over 200 people that have been involved in Be Your Own Boss. So they have become customers as well. They have become borrowers, and it's good because you know them. I think that's because they're such high risk and they've been turned down elsewhere, or they've got a very poor credit score, they would immediately some of them have already been turned down by the wonderful business enterprise fund loans because of their terrible credit score. But because we get to know them and we know their history and they explain to us why they're in that situation, we're able to take a risk and think, actually, that's, it sounds like a nice little business. Let's go for it. Let's make that really small loan investment and help them to, enterprise their way out of poverty. And we have a couple of people who have IVAs, and in individual voluntary agreements, they're not allowed to get loans. But on both occasions, the IVA supervisor has said, has given us given them permission to accept a tiny loan from us, because that helps them. Is more likely to pay back loans if you're earning the money to do it, and that's it's a really important thing. And the Charity Commission was really quite pushy about understanding this, and so is the Financial Conduct Authority. Our lending to people who are really high risk because they've got debts and they've got poor credit is really a challenge. If it's really easy just to say no, and it's very, very high risk. But for us to, when we talk to our potential borrowers, to be able to see that the loan repayments can come out of their business rather than their household budget is really, really important. And we've had no defaults, of the 15 loans. And actually, I'm failing on my target, because our target for defaults was much higher than that, because you're lending to people who are really high risk. If you're lending to the easy people, then you're not doing your job properly. We're not doing our job properly. But, we've had a couple of times where we've let people defer payments, and we've got one woman who's paying £5 a month, which is a real slow repayment plan. But we're a friendly, listening, understanding lender whose people very kindly and trustingly share their stories and their history with us, which means that we can, understand where they're coming from, more importantly, understand what their ambitions are, and put a tiny little loan in place for them to be able to get to that next step. So that's our niche, really.
Yeah, so it's KYC, isn't it? Know your customer. And you're in a better position because you're not doing it on a bunch of abstracted spreadsheets and so on, and some random score that someone's come up with. You're dealing with real people in front of you that you know something about.
Exactly.
How many of which is where they live.
I know, it's true. And actually, it's our charity is called Trust Leeds, and it's a very trusting relationship. When you think about the amount of data that you're handing over to somebody when you're asking for a loan, it's privileged personal information, and that's just the data, let alone the story behind it. So it's a real trusting relationship. And the process, we like to think that the process is very light touch, but actually it's not. It can't be, because we need to see that they're going to be able to repay it. So quite often there's a bit of support in there as well, helping people just think through a little bit more. And we do run other programs as well for our potential borrowers to help them get their cash flow sorted and things like that. Because a lot of people have great ideas and they're passionate about their product or their service. They've got social media sorted, their marketing plan sorted, but the financial side is something that they do find really hard. And as a lender, that's the bit that you're really looking at. Can they actually repay it? So we hadn't accounted for that. I hadn't appreciated when I set up Trust Leeds and set up this third element, the microfinance element. I hadn't appreciated how little understanding there is of basic finances and business finances, from a budget through to costing and pricing through to forecasting. And so we've actually developed some little help tools and things as well to help our borrowers understand that. And some of them get it, but most of them find it really hard, and we can't lend to them until they've done that. So we're quite one of our trustees, for example, volunteers to sit with people and go through it with them. So and of course, a lot of people that we lend to, their English might not be brilliant, their literacy might not be great, they absolutely know their stuff. They would never, we ask, one of the questions we ask on the application form is kind of, well, who else is out there and what makes you different? So we're not saying what's your competitor comparison summary and what's your USP, but they absolutely know those things. They've got a real entrepreneurial gene. They understand a lot of the aspects of their business, but they do find the financial side quite tricksy. And it's a shame because that's not something that I had factored in terms of our time. And it's a lot of one-to-one support. But with our trustee now, it means that we're developing a bit of a role description for volunteers to help with that side of things. So we can get volunteers to do that, to walk alongside people and help them to fill those, understand cash flow and get their budgeting sorted. And that makes it much more easy for us to lend to them when they can understand that.
Yeah, but you can't even, unless you can put a piece of paper together with your proposal on, you wouldn't get any business loans.
You wouldn't. Anyway. So for some people, I'm like, you talk, I'll type. Because the idea of filling in a form, I mean, I hate forms too. goodness know what I'm doing this, but so some people, they actually having to write it down on paper can be quite hard, and that's fine. But the business has to be viable. And I say we're not a charity. We are a charity, but but our loan fund needs to be recycled, needs to come back. And so we're an enterprising charity. We're a social enterprise, and it's the real world of business. It's a business decision, and although it's a personal loan for business purposes, actually it needs to be treated really seriously. And again, I complained about the FCA's process having no proportionality, and with our lending, actually, if we're lending £500 or £1,000, it still pretty much needs to be the same process. I still have to see 6 months of bank statements, for example. I still have to see their identity documents. We also can lend less than that, and I think to our members or people that we know through our groups, we can lend £50. And again, people think, £50, you can't do anything with £50, but you can.
You can pay bills with it.
Yeah, I mean, and certainly for our borrowers, the £50 to start something off, or to just, especially for our groups, for example. I mean, we had one group who they wanted to do a car boot sale to get some money for their group funds. None of them had a car, and they saved 50p a week each. They couldn't even pay the down payment, so Trust Leeds lent them the £30 down payment on a pitch. I was like, I'll volunteer to be your driver. So I had the car, they gathered all the materials, and between us all we set up this stall. They were manning the stall, and they made £27 profit for their group fund. That's amazing. And that's in a self-reliant group where they save 50p a week or something normally. So we're happy to lend them the money to invest there. They paid that back, and they had some profit as well. And that was their first ever enterprising endeavour. Mm. And from that, one of the members of that group now has her own small business. Mm. She's still on universal credit, and she probably always will be because of health reasons. But she also has a very small kitchen table business, which is consistent with her benefit status, and she's got purpose. She's got a really nice little business, and so for some people that it's not about registering a company or being high growth potential. It's about your ambition is where you are. There's no less ambitious. But I must be the only lender that actually cheers when I see someone's credit score coming back as in the red. Terrible credit score. I'm like, yes, we can lend to them. We can't lend to somebody who's got a really good credit score. They can get money elsewhere. Yeah. But so we're for people who can't get it. People who are new to the UK that don't have a credit score, or have never been in debt, or have never had a credit card. Or have had terrible situations where they've got, been declared bankrupt and things like that. Obviously, we have to be really careful because our money is donated to us. So it's charity money, and we're lending it to people so they can give it back to us so that we can lend it on to other people. But it is about seeing that spark of entrepreneurism, of ambition, of, graft, and that just a little bit of a loan can really help people to get their business going or growing, and that's what we're here for.
So how did you get into this? It's like you don't just go, I know what I need to do. I mean, you said like the microloans came on as a later component.
It's really...
But then you had to do all the business stuff
yes.
as well. So were you the initiator of this idea? Did it come to you from someone else? Like, how did this come about?
How did it start? So I think the first step, now I look back and think, oh yeah, there was logic. The first step was, one of my jobs was to set up the Emmaus community in Leeds. I don't know if you know the Emmaus model. It's about helping people who are homeless. So I was the first member of staff, and my job was raise the money, make it happen, make it a healthy community, and make it a sustainable business. So that's quite a big task. And so I did with our trustees. We raised £3 million. We bought the building. We visited Emmaus communities across the UK. And the one of the kind of heart of the Emmaus movement is about helping people who are homeless or who were homeless to help themselves by helping other people. Mm-hmm. And that model, by being useful, by working in the shop. So everybody who lives in an Emmaus community, every companion, commits to living above the shop in our case and working full-time to the best of their ability in the business. So when we set up Emmaus Leeds, we had 6 business income streams. We had a car park, we had a small coffee shop, we had recycled furniture store, and we had a little computer suite, we had a pack testing and repair thing, and something else. Can't remember. We had 6 different income streams, which gave a wonderful variety of jobs for people with a wonderful variety of skills. We had a core staff to sort of just to kind of keep the basics covered. And so it meant that companions come in. So people who had been chefs before, brilliant. They worked in the community kitchen and they did the cooking for the whole community. People who, who were really good with their hands, worked in the workshop and repaired furniture. Other companions, helped set up the store each day. And some who were able to had the gift of the gab were great on the till. So there's a whole variety of jobs for people to do, but the purpose and the premise is about developing your skills, your confidence, your sense of purpose by being purposeful and doing something for other people. And so that really stayed with me. I set that community up, then fledged it. It's now a really successful social enterprise. I became a member of the board a few years later. It was lovely to see something that I had helped to found, and then as at a different stage of evolution. A really, really lovely model. And it always struck me how powerful that is, that sense of, I can't give you much, but if you join in, then together we can make a real difference. People who some people think are, in the worst situation in the world, or who are really at the very, very worst state, being street homeless or homeless, are perfectly able to help run a business and to be responsible for money and be responsible for driving vans around Leeds and picking up and donating furniture. And, it's completely normal in the Emmaus community. And that's just helping people to recover their dignity and their self-respect and their sense of purpose and work commitment and routine and feeling part of something. So that was a really fabulous job. I absolutely loved that job, setting up that community. And then I moved down to Wales to run the Community Foundation for Wales, which is a different organisation. It's an organisation that manages philanthropy, that encourages people to give to small communities and manages that giving through grant making. Mm-hmm. So I really, again, it was hideous at times and completely wonderful at others. But we were able to take that struggling charity to a real pillar position in Wales. We were able to get Prince Charles to be the patron, as he was then. We set up the world's first national community endowment fund. We, all sorts of things. A micro venture philanthropy funds. And in that programme, I became aware of a lot of small charities and organisations in Wales, and we would fund them, but we'd get to know them as well, and we'd support them. And I met a woman called Karen Davis, who set up a charity called Purple Shoots, inspired by the Scottish Revolution model and the Muhammad Yunus model. And so she was facilitating and encouraging people to set up their own self-reliant groups, and she was doing a microfinance. And she had a business finance background, so she was much more comfortable with the microfinance side. And so we were able to make some grants for her organisation, and we got to know each other. And so we would just meet up once a month for lunch or something, because I really just liked her and I was really interested in what she was doing. And after 10 years at the Community Foundation, I wanted to move back to where my husband was, in Leeds still. And so I decided it was the right time for me to leave. So I left that and I came back to Leeds and was really privileged to be able to have what I called a princess year. Just a year to think about what I wanted to do next, take a breather, because it's I work quite kind of hard and fast, and I did need a bit of a break. And so within a couple of months I was bored, and I just kept thinking, what do I want to do next? I was looking at jobs to apply for, but I just was thinking about what has really struck me, what am I really motivated by, what's really interests me and what really intrigues me. And this Emmaus model was something that really seemed so sensible and so important, and such unfortunately quite a unique way of looking at people. Just expecting people to be able to do things, not just thinking...
trusting people and giving them an opportunity.
Exactly. And letting them rise to the occasion rather than treating them like poor homeless people.
Fail.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was really important. And I kept thinking about what Karen was doing at Purple Shoots. And she'd been started a couple of years, so she was just getting things off the ground. And I phoned her up and I said, I'm really interested in the microfinance and the self-reliant group model. We don't have either of those in Leeds or anywhere else in the UK, other than this little Scotland, a little bit in Manchester, a little bit in Wales. Would you be okay if I did a feasibility study and just had a little think about whether that's something that Leeds might want, might need, and might add value? And she's like, I can't give you any money or any time, but everything else you can have. She said, absolutely perfect. So her business has grown. She's lending in different parts of the UK now as well. But I wanted to do it slightly different from the way that she'd do it, because I was the third of the pioneers. I was able to see what was tricksy and what was difficult for the other two, and then find other solutions. So I just did again, my background in, charity leadership and charity and strategic development. Feasibility study was definitely my comfort zone. So I interviewed about 75 people in Leeds. I interviewed community anchor organisations and people at various parts of the council, adult services and economic development. I talked to potential members of self-reliant groups. I talked to other lenders, all sorts, wide variety of different people to assess, is this something that, there's nothing worse than a charity setting up because it wants to. Charities are there to meet needs and to fill gaps. So I was really determined, is there a gap? And is there a need for this model, this self-reliant way of thinking, microfinance way of thinking? So I didn't want to start anything until I was really sure of that. But that feasibility study really showed that there was nothing like self-reliant groups or Be Your Own Boss programme or microfinance in Leeds, or indeed most across West Yorkshire, that there was a real interest from the agencies, the organisations, the institutions and the community groups I'd spoken to in the model. And, really unusually, in talking to various people, we actually got one very big grant. As a startup grant, a very kind of low level kind of, that sounds really interesting. Here's some a startup grant, which is completely unheard of. And a friend of mine who works in London but is a Leeds girl, or came to Leeds University rather, also made a donation to set up the charity as well. So in that sort of 9-month feasibility study, we had confirmed there was a need, sparked people's interests, gathered a constellation of allies around us, had several people who said they'd be interested in becoming a trustee if we went for it, and had some startup capital, some seed corn capital from donations. So it was obviously the stars were all lining up for the Trust Leeds models, to be honest. And so I went from sort of volunteering to doing, I think I was £50 a week or something, just as a sort of token gesture for bits and pieces. And then thanks to a really cool anchor organisation called LS14 Trust, we partnered with them on a European funding bid, and we attracted some European funding after the Leeds Community Foundation had made several grants, a startup grant and then a sort of growth grant and things. So we were able to show that there was a gap, show that there was interest, show that there was need, start things slowly and get funding to help us to grow and develop. So that's really how we started. That was the establishment era, the first 3 years. And then we had a development era, which was the sort of second 3 years, which was, refining things, bringing in the Be Your Own Boss model, bringing in, learning from the self-reliant groups and what works and what didn't work. And what we've really found is that self-reliant groups have a really lovely positioning within the mental health arena. So a lot of the programs that are support peer programs in mental health or support programs are 12 weeks of this or 6 weeks of CBT or 12 weeks of heroes or 10 weeks of that, and then they finish. And actually the people who are doing that, they've bonded with their heroes people or program people, and the self-reliant group model is we facilitate people to set up their own groups, so it gives people an opportunity to build on that sense of community that they have created through being on sometimes it's just being on a knitting program, sometimes it's through being on a mental health program, sometimes it's through being in a community group that's sort of going nowhere. And we facilitate them to develop their own self-reliant group over 6-12 weeks, doing various exercises and games and thinking activities to help to find their mojo, find their purpose, and save and share and support and learn from each other and do something vaguely enterprising and have their own self-reliant group. They don't need grants. So the self-reliant group side establishing that first was really important. Then the Be Your Own Boss, helping individuals to become self-employed by giving them a self-reliant group around them, even though everyone's doing individual groups. And then the microfinance to lend, £20 to the community groups or £1,000 to the entrepreneurs. So we just do those three things. Community self-reliant groups, now more often to help people who've been on group programs maintain and sustain their interest and their support through providing with this model. Be Your Own Boss programs to help people make sure they've got the basics right before setting up on their own. And microfinance, small personal loans for business purposes from £10 to £1,000 to help people who don't have family, friends, or a decent credit score that they can borrow on the back of. So it's sticking to our knitting. Those are our three core things. And having established that and measured the impact and got a lot of data and feedback and information and changing things and tweaking things, we're now sharing those models so that other people can incorporate into their own work. And I talked about the mental health in the mental health arena. Absolutely, one of the biggest successes I think for us to date is that there's a manager at a general practice partnership who has as part of her role description to develop the use of self-reliant groups in their community health groups. Mm-hmm. And there are 2 members of staff working within the Leeds mental health arena who we've trained to facilitate self-reliant groups, who are now offering those groups to people who've been on various programs, mental health programs within the services. So we've shared the model with them, we've taught them how to do it. We have a monthly coffee club where they can, or anytime they can phone me up and say, I'm not sure about this, how's that going? And so rather than us growing, we've helped other people to incorporate those models into their work. Mm-hmm. And we're doing the same with Be Your Own Boss. We've got interest from a couple of local authorities and some other big community anchor organisations to help them or coach them to run Be Your Own Boss in their own area. And so, we're only interested in Leeds and West Yorkshire. North Yorkshire's lovely, but actually, so they are, looking to us to commission us to help them set it up and train their staff so they can offer this unique programme of self-employment, which nobody else is doing in their community. And that's at the heart of charity. That's at the heart of Emmaus, helping other people to do things, to help themselves. It's at the heart of the self-reliant model, sharing, saving, earning, and passing it on and passing it forward.
Mm. So I can't remember if you said it on the recording. We were talking briefly about networking, and we've mentioned some of the networks that you're creating. Do you try and sort of fit them all together into a big super group, or do you keep them in discrete little...
We do sometimes. That's such a good question. So with our community self-reliant groups, even though right at the beginning when we meet them, we tell them about this global model and there are 20 million self-reliant groups around the world and we're making it work in Leeds and you're making it work in Leeds. Most people, they get it in theory, but they're like in their own place, in their own community, or in their, so I say community of geography, interest or needs. So it might be people in Gipton, it might be people who love knitting, or it might be people who have fibromyalgia. So as long as they've got that one thing in common, then that's enough. If they want to have to be a self-reliant group, they commit to that. So
do you make the network sort of more widely available to existing members of because you've got that contact book there,
yes,
which is not always going to be useful, But in a lot of cases, could
well,
be.
we try to kind of dovetail. You're absolutely right. So we've supported about 35 self-reliant groups, and 12 of those have been Be Your Own Boss, and the others have been community ones. And so, and one of the lovely things about this concept of self-reliance is that people, it's their group, it's not our group, it's their group. We walk alongside them, and we're a bit bossy in the early days by helping to work through the workbooks to kind of get all the basics in place. But then it's their group, and it's a success if they decide they don't want to meet anymore. It's a decision that they've made. It's a success if they're meeting 6 years on. It's a success if they decide to meet for 6 weeks and they save, £35 and then go to Wetherspoons together and have a celebration and decide they don't want to meet anymore. Self-reliant, it's really, really important that it's led and driven and developed by the people who have their own groups. But of course, we really want to be part of our network and part of our movement. So every year we have a gathering of the clan. We have a gathering of and everybody who is in, was in, wants to be in a self-reliant group can come along to that, and we do different workshops. And we get the members to run the workshops. We get the members to be the inspirational speakers. And, whether that's at the last one, quite a few people really like diamond art, which I'd never heard of before. It's a bit like sort of painting by numbers with, make these, and people find that so therapeutic, or they really enjoy it. It's a lovely hobby. And so we did a diamond art session, and a couple of our members were in this little room, and we got loads of diamond art stuff, and people just went and made their own things and took them away. But it wasn't me teaching how people to do it. I haven't got a clue. It was the members who love diamond art who were sharing their passion with other people and showing them how to do it. We had one of our Be Your Own Boss members who wants to be a performance poet as a freelancer. And so we commissioned her to do a poetry workshop at the gathering. Another member is a massage therapist, and so she did hand massage sessions for everybody. So we always use the skills and the expertise of our members to support each other. So we have the gathering of the clan every year, and then we do things that are sort of cross anybody can come to. And the best example of that was last week. We had we took over the bottom floor of the Corn Exchange, and we did a pop-up market. So we had one guy there was somebody who we'd lent some money to, who has his own business creating household furniture out of driftwood. He's a really, really interesting artist, and we'd made a loan to his company, or to him, to develop his business. And so that was an opportunity for him. We had other people who had done a program that we had done Be Your Own Boss programs so they could test trade. So we had one woman there who had done Be Your Own Boss and had been making these amazing sort of high protein products, food products. And hasn't been selling them, but she'd been giving them to family and friends. So this was the first time she'd actually test traded at a market. So we helped to get her insurance sorted, and she was selling to the public and asking them questions and things. So we had quite a few people in that category. And somebody who was in one of the community self-reliant groups had a stall. So we provide that different opportunities for people to come together in our network, and others to come and join in as well. And it was just lovely because we had the experience. One person was experienced, she was telling other people. One of our Be Your Own Boss members who had just set up a business to curate markets, we commissioned her with one of our lovely grants. We commissioned her to run a market stall trading course, so that when it came to the day, some of the traders had actually done Bianca's 6-week program. This is how you merchandise. This is how this is the health and safety you need to think about. This is the insurance you need to think about. And so for a lot of people who are moving from hobby selling or wanting to develop, maybe get a shop eventually, market trading is a really lovely place to start. So we did a lot of work in the last year around that. But these projects and these activities are open to anybody in the network. So we have our community gathering. And thanks to a grant from West Yorkshire Combined Authority, we're now launching a boss network. So it's a network for people who are their own boss, kitchen table entrepreneurs across West Yorkshire, who probably wouldn't go to things like BNI Network, which are really good, but quite kind of American, quite male, quite sort of, formal networking. But,
really competitive.
It's quite muscular, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, you've got to bring people in, and you've got so long to do stuff.
It's brilliant. It's a really good way of networking and building business. But a lot of people that we support...
It's quite intense.
Yeah, exactly. It's about working on your own is quite, it's quite lonely. And just having a group...
And you've got to build up confidence as well.
Yeah.
Like, you've got to know that you're starting, you're like, will anyone like this? Can I do it?
Yeah.
Am I any good at it?
One of the things with Be Your Own Boss, we learn from fuck-ups just as much as we learn from good examples, and sharing the horrors, sharing the victories, learning from things that people have done. So yes, we bring in workshop leaders to impart knowledge, but the magic is because of the other members and encouraging other members to say, what worked, what didn't work, what was the worst thing that happened to you? So we're just being really real and honest and safe, in a very safe place to sort of say, I'm not really sure about this. I never understood what that meant. So it's that kind of environment and those values about sharing and learning together that are really important in all of our work to help people build their confidence and their competence and their skills, but to feel part of something as well.
I mean, it sounds very non-judgmental.
Yeah.
Like a lot of charities can be very moralizing and very like, you need to do these things and you need this. And it's kind of, I don't want to use the word failure, but it seems like there's space to make mistakes.
Yes.
And kind of like there's no expectation that you've got to get this right. Well, we told you this last week. Like,
it's really true, and I think that's fear stops so many people from even saying out loud what their ambition might be. And so many of us have been kind of battered in one sense of the word or other. The idea about saying, the finale of our Be Your Own Boss program is a pitch. And it's very gentle. I don't even tell them it's a pitch until like halfway through, because it's far too scary to think you're going to be doing a 2-minute presentation. But it is. And people who, won't have their camera on at the beginning of the programme and only respond in the chat, at the end of 12 weeks are doing a 2-minute, this is me, this is my business, this is my ambition for my business. And it's really powerful. But it can only happen if the workshop leaders, me and Rebecca, who are facilitating it, our team, Nikki and Sarah and Maddie, aren't sharing their experiences, the good, the bad and the ugly as well, and making it a safe space. And I think one of the reasons why we've had some funding from a DWP funded programme through West Yorkshire Combined Authority and Forum Central to work with people who are long-term unemployed is because we have this really kind of non-judgy. We're not the DWP. We're not a get back to work. We're a slightly kind of floppity, gentle, very, structured. There's a structure, there's a purpose, there's a clear methodology, but a very kind of kind, gentle, fun, real space for people to learn. And that builds confidence and trust and helps people to realise how much they have themselves, their own assets, their own skills, their own aspirations. Say it out loud and try it amongst an audience and a constellation of people who've been there, done it, got the t-shirt, fucked it up, done brilliantly. I remember talking to a bank manager at one of the high street banks about what we were doing, and she's like, oh yes, and then one of your Be Your Own Boss members might become the next Richard Branson. And I was like, no, that's not what it is at all. I've completely explained it completely wrong if that's what you're thinking. It just couldn't be more wrong. There's a lot more role models than Richard Branson anyway. It's not about high growth potential. It's not about making, it's about work and earn, and most people we work with are trying to get off benefits. It's about self-reliance, it's about independence, and being part of a crew around you can really help to keep your confidence through the wobbly times. And so it's and we're there. Our network is there for anybody who wants to use it whenever they want to, and the groups are there. Even with our community groups, they stop, they start, they explode, they implode, they take off, they fizzle out, and then they come back. All of those outcomes are successful because it's people making their own decisions. And even if, like I said, they only meet for 6 weeks, they've committed to something, they've gone every week, they've saved a bit of money, they've done something meaningful together, they've learned a few new skills, they've made some new friends, they've had a good cackle. And actually, what a great combination.
So and I said I wasn't going to say failure, but in terms of businesses, you will be well aware of this, like the failure rate, especially within the first few years. Do you kind of coach them around that? Do you put any preparation in? Are you kind of like, look, the odds are that this won't work, but we're here to help you. And we know a lot of stuff, and we've been through some of this, so we can help.
Yes. Yeah. I think the stage that where we are, our kind of presence is in that really the ideation stage. So it's a quite kind of early stage. It's exploratory, and frankly, the people that we work with know about failure.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And they, and actually, everybody knows about business failure. And because we're looking more at the self-employment routes, yes, many of them do go on to set up businesses, but some of them won't even get to the £1,000 threshold in order to register for self-employment. So, and some of them, it'll take several years before they do that. And quite a few people that we support have, they have a PIP, or they're on an ESA, or they're, like I said, they've been declared unfit for work, whatever that's called now. So it's about slow and steady wins the race. So it's about, first of all, it's about covering your costs. And then it's about maybe making a small amount of profit, but is that, make sure that's consistent with your benefits or consistent with what you need. And then we take people where they are, and we encourage them to really think about where they are and to be proud of where they are. So we talk a lot about different ambitions. So if some people say, my biggest ambition, I want to, set up a company and I want to employ 20 people. And others are saying, my biggest ambition is to earn £20 a week, because that's what I'm allowed to earn on top of my benefits. And as a single woman in a single person household, that makes a huge amount to my income. And then other people saying, my son's autistic. If I can set up this small business, he can, when he leaves school, he can come and work in this business and have some kind of employment. Or, I've left corporate life, I burnt out, and now I'm thinking, and now I need to find a way to just, earn half the salary, but just have a bit of a life as well. All of those motivations. So we're operating at that kind of level, at that end of the spectrum. It's about how people to get to their next step. And actually in Leeds and across West Yorkshire, there's a good network of startup managers. Once you get into the more formal business startup enterprise support programs that are for people who've kind of got to that level where they're thinking about taking on the next member of staff, or how do I start paying for myself better. So there's a really good ecology of business support advice out there for people who are at that stage, but there is very little for people who are at the level that we're at. Yeah.
So I'm going to move us on to the other questions. So I'm going to start with COVID/lockdown. Now, obviously, were you doing this then? Had you started?
Yeah, we just started. Yeah.
So, generally, what I want to look at here is your experience going into lockdown. What was that like? And then coming out, was there anything that changed in a sort of permanent way for you?
It was big and horrible and massive for everybody, wasn't it? But one of the things from a Trust Leeds point of view was that we just started on our first element of our three products, if you like, which was the community Self-Reliant Groups, and working in various communities in Leeds. And lockdown, of course, Self-Reliant Groups are about face-to-face. They're about laughing together, cackling, hugging, crying, doing things together, being together, getting out once a week and committing to each other and to yourself to be with this friendship group. And lockdown, of course, completely poleaxed that. But very quickly, we realised that sense of being together was so important. It always had been important, but particularly important in lockdown. And so we really quickly adapted a huggy, face-to-face, in-person group meeting, Self-Reliant Group model, onto a huggy online group collaborative sharing, saving community. So, and a lot of people that we work with in those, particularly in the community Self-Reliant Groups, face digital exclusion as well as everything else. And so agencies like 100% Digital Leeds were instrumental in all sorts of infrastructures for helping address that. And we were able to get a grant from them to buy some tablets, to operate a tablet lending scheme with SIM cards and Wi-Fi's, and we had a couple of grants as well in that. So basically I was able to drive around Leeds and drop tablets, Wi-Fi enabled tablets over people's hedges and in the bottom of the lifts in the tower block, so that our members actually had tablets and Wi-Fi. So that was the first step. Because it's kind of like either you can or you don't. There was nothing in the middle really for them. Either our members were digitally literate and, had everything on their phone and might have had a computer, or they had absolutely nothing. So we had to kind of get everybody back to place there. And so that was helped, massively by the funding, and by not just the funding from Digital Leeds, but the kind of walking alongside bit, because I'm not that digitally savvy. So they helped us to develop our expertise and our kind of inner resources to be able to help other people.
Yeah.
So we moved, there was probably about 8 groups at that time. So they all became digital groups, and they would meet, and I think WhatsApp was really good. I think WhatsApp was great, and Zoom to help people develop that. And then we did things like with our pals in Wales, we did a summer village show, but we did it digitally. So each week there were different competitions. So it's like this week it's the best Victoria sponge, the best handmade teddy, and the best idea for something else. So we'd post that, and then members and family and friends of members would send in pictures of their Victoria sponge, and then they all got entered, and someone would win a prize. So we did that all over the summer, which was just really great fun. The best picture of a pet, or all of those things. So that really did help. So the groups carried on meeting, and then we had these joint things, which is a very different way of working. We hadn't, Self-Reliant Groups in the UK hadn't worked in that way before. And in fact, Revolution, which is the Scottish charity, they went completely online in the end. So they became a sort of an online organisation, whereas we wanted to really get back to the sort of hug side of things quite quickly. So that really helped. We managed to change the model and adapt the model for those difficult times. But also we got, we did things like I'd drop off round people's houses, the ones that liked sewing. I'd drop off little patches, and then they would embroider them, and we made a big blanket out of them. Or my coconut, I'm not a good cook at all, but I can make coconut biscuits. They're so easy. So I'd make a batch of those and drop them off at people's houses, and then other people would do the same. And so we found ways of safely distancing, obviously, and COVID compliance, find ways of communicating and being there for each other, which was, fantastic with the online capability that we had then, and developed that. When it ended, we found that a lot of our community members, SRG members, didn't want to, they were really shy about going out again. So it took a long time to kind of horse whisper people actually to meetings. So that lack of confidence, and people who already have social anxiety and things like that, it's hard enough anyway, but then lockdown just completely exacerbated all of the, mental health. Just anybody with whatever flavour or degree of mental health challenges just was exacerbated so much, I think, in lockdown. And that's when we began to work with the Transforming Mental Health programme, and we got a grant to explore how Self-Reliant Group model could add value to mental health support programmes and give sustainability and self-reliance as a next step. So it was an awful thing for billions of people. We begged, borrowed and juggled, and were granted and found a way to make it work and make it meaningful and build relationships in a different way. And it helped to inform the future of Trust Leeds as well. So, yeah, we made the best of it, but people died.
Yeah. And and all sorts of things. I mean, when it came to lockdown, you're obviously very early in this project. Were you like, what's this? Are we done? Like, how did you feel about it? Were you kind of like, this is just another one of those things, I'll deal with it, I'll get over it, I'll
it didn't feel...
We didn't know what was going on, so it's like, what am I doing?
Exactly.
How long does this...
No, I did feel all of those things, but actually, when you've been, facilitated people to set up their own groups and seen how much strength and friendship and love and support and energy that there is in other people. It's so all we're really doing is kind of energize, help, giving a bit of energy to help other people find their own in their groups. It's just, it never felt like anything was difficult. It was just like, oh, how on earth are we going to do this? So it's like phoning people up and saying, what do you think? Can we meet online? What works? So actually all the energy and the inspiration came from the members. They're like, oh, we can't stop now. We need to carry on meeting. Well, I've got a phone. I'm fine. Everyone's got a phone. Brilliant. Let's set up a WhatsApp group. Who knows how to do that? And so it was actually, it came from.
They were running ahead of you.
Yeah, I know. Like, wait for me, which is lovely, because of course that's how you're supposed to do it. It's about other people becoming self-reliant, not reliant on us. So that energy, even though we were quite early on from the members wanting to do it, was great. So we're surrounded by people who are interesting and who are interested and who are energy sharers and givers and allies. And those are people who some people might say are, unemployed, layabouts, feckless women, whatever. And actually we just don't see that. We just don't see that at all. And the members wanted to carry on meeting and found ways to do it. And we, as an organisation, we found some fun things like the village show, but that wouldn't have worked if people weren't saying, oh, does a chameleon count as a pet? So, a house pet, or the Syrian, we had a group of Syrian women who were Syrian refugees. And their Victoria sponges looked nothing like the Victoria sponges from the WI, but they were magnificent. So, I think the energy that comes from other people, and I think that's a lovely thing. It attracts good energy as well. So it was just like, it was the practical thing of people not having Wi-Fi and not having tablets or laptops. And that was resolved by a very concerted effort by a lot of agencies and our local authority in particular at Leeds. Leeds Digital City, Leeds Compassionate City, Leeds Maslow City, inclusive growth city. Child friendly. You talked about the environmental city. I think we are, and having worked in Wales and travelled relatively a lot in the UK. We are really, really very lucky to live in Leeds and to have the council that we have, and the infrastructure and the kind of ecology that we have of private, public, third sector. I think it's a good energy here in Leeds to be part of all of that. And they came together, all of those organisations and people came together at a time of crisis and helped make something that was devastating bearable for a lot of people.
I mean, there was incredible stuff that happened during that time. And like you say, Leeds, the response of all the third sector organisations and linking with the council was like really good.
Yeah. And just, that perpetuates. I'm not a faith person. I'm not a church person. But when I was appointed to be the first worker at Emmaus, it was 40 churches that made collections and fundraised that helped to set up, that helped pay for the deposit to buy this building to set up the community. It was, and in the food banks and things, it's very often those, if you're not a person of faith, you kind of don't really see it that way. But, It was quite humbling for me to realise the role of faith and faith agencies in, well, we say addressing poverty, but it's much more than that. I mean, that's the title. But it's about community, isn't it, really? And it's about values.
Yeah. It's opportunity and connection and so on. It's like the whole idea of, well, the state shouldn't pay for any of this because it should be your family and your friends. And it's like, well, what if you don't have any of that?
Exactly.
And that doesn't mean, oh, you're an awful person. What if you grew up in care and you're thrown out at 16 or whatever? You don't know anybody. There's a million different circumstances where it's just like, this isn't my fault. Yeah. I don't know anybody. I haven't got anything.
Yeah. And it's money. It is money, but it's also confidence. It's also someone's, but like, we were saying earlier about the Emmaus thing, just, asking, and again, Leeds asset-based city, what have you got? What have you got to bring to the table? You might not have any money, but what can you bring to the table? Oh, I love baking cake. With our Self-Reliant Groups, very, very early on, we do this sort of game about what can you do? Oh, I can't do anything. I'm hopeless. I'm like, well, actually, I know that your neighbour said to me that, you're really good at baking. Oh, brilliant. Will you bring the cakes next week? And suddenly people are, it's really simple for people to refine their own, what we would call skills and qualities. But basically it's like, we can all contribute in ways that work for us and for other people as well. And it's interesting, this thing about self-reliance though, because our model, as I said earlier, came out of Bangladesh. It came out of Bangladesh and India and many nations where, it's big in the African nations as well, where there's no welfare state or very little welfare state. So the self-reliant groups, the emphasis on saving and enterprising is much bigger there. They're more like our be your own boss groups rather than our community groups. And in the UK, where there is a welfare state, yes, like all self-reliant groups over the world, all members save. It may only be 10p a week, but actually they save, they have their own funds, and they do enterprising things. That definition is quite broad. We make it quite broad to build their own funds, and they can lend that money to each other. I can't pay my electricity this week. Oh, can I borrow £10 to top up my phone, whatever? And they have their self-reliant group. They have their own funds, and they don't fundraise. And one of the interesting things in working alongside and appreciating the role of community development people in the city is it takes them a while to get their head around this. Our members have their own. They don't apply to the lottery. They don't set up a constitution and have a treasurer, normally a man, and a secretary, normally a woman who has to do all the work. They're their self-reliant group. They decide what the roles are. They share out the roles. They take it in turns to do different things. They don't need to have a constitution. They don't need to apply to the lottery. And, I met several community development workers a few years ago, and they're like, well, our people couldn't do anything without a grant. They wouldn't make something happen or do something. Who's going to pay for the tea and coffee? Who's going to pay?
Did you give them the opportunity?
Who's going to pay for the room hire? And actually in self-reliant groups, like, no, you don't. There's always somebody who's got a spare notebook who can take the notes. There's always somebody, they find it for themselves. And it's normal for me because I've grown up in the Emmaus movement and the Self-Reliant Group global model. Whereas in communities which are very nurtured and looked after by the most amazing community anchor organisations, sometimes they can forget that people do have resources. I don't want to sound too critical because it's quite kind of political in a way, but there's one place where we were encouraging people to do you want to set up your own self-reliant group? We'll help you to do that. Like, well, why would I want to come to a self-reliant group when I can come here and get a free breakfast every Thursday? And they arrange a summer holiday to Bridlington for all of us every year, and I can pick up my free SIM cards and all of these, which is amazing offers, these beautiful organisations that are trying to help their members and their community overcome so many barriers. But actually some people forget that you can do things on your own.
Yeah.
It's,
and it's, I don't want to go into learned helplessness or anything. But it
does tell a little bit like that.
Yeah. But I think what's important that you've said there that we've kind of not mentioned, but I'll say here, it sounds like you're creating systems and environments and scenarios where people can win. Like we've talked about people who've had a lot of experience of failure. When things are going really badly for you, you need those wins. You need something to work. You need to do a thing and go, oh, I did it and it worked.
Yes.
And it didn't all fall apart. And then that's how you start building that confidence back up. It's like, you can do this. Just take your time, pay attention, like, do it. You can do this. And I think that's a really important part of it. And the ownership and all of that kind of stuff. But it is teaching people that you can do it. You're like, you don't have to be looked after.
Yeah.
You don't have to just give up on everything and wait for someone to sort of, give you something to make you feel a bit involved still.
it's not.
You can actively be involved.
You're so right. It's not even teaching people. It's helping them to realise that they can.
Yeah.
And that's why, when we have our gathering, most of the people who are doing workshops or doing chats or doing whatever, they're people who are in self-reliant groups or in the Be Your Own Boss groups. It's people who are like them, like me, like us. It's not great, wonderful role models swinging in, telling us about their privileged people. It's one of our members now sits on our board as an advisor to our board, and she was in the first self-reliant group that we had. And as a role model, and as a she would die if I to be called all of those things. But she's her talking about her small business, her ambitions, where she's come from and what she's doing now is a much better, much more relatable, interesting story than having, Getty imaged people with their stories. It's about, and again, it's the same in the Emmaus community. Everybody in that community was homeless. And they had very different stories. If you've got one thing in common, then you can really share. In self-reliant groups, what you've got in common is you want to be part of something. You all like knitting, or you've all got a mental health challenge, or you'll all live in Kirkstall, or whatever it is. And from that, you can share and you can find common things and you can learn together. And so it's providing that space for people to find their mojo, find their energy, realise that they have something to offer. And it's not we don't offer it to them, they offer it to each other. It's about people supporting each other. We're helping with a little bit of a catalyst maybe, and sometimes giving a bit of energy to help people find a bit of energy. And the self-reliant group model structure, the games and the exercises and the things that we talk about help them through this arc. They don't even realise that they're getting there. Till they've got their own group, they found their name, they've decided how much they're saving each week, they decided what their first project is. Or with Be Your Own Boss, we're not helping them with their business, we're helping them through explaining some of the things that they need to have in place to then do it for themselves. And then say, I didn't understand that. Oh, I did. This is about this. Or, so it's about people. It's about helping each other. It's about sharing, about helping each other, about being part of something, finding a purpose, and finding friendship and allies and colleagues who are in a similar boat. And that's what we do. And that's what helps people to grow and to feel more purposeful and feel better about themselves and their communities.
So in your work, is climate change something that comes up? Is it sort of built into the design of your work? Do you think about it, or is that something that's that's a further down the line problem for your organisation?
It's such a multi-layered question, isn't it? So as Trust Leeds, as any company, any charity, any organisation, we need to be really aware of that and what our footprint is and what we're encouraging other people to do to think about climate change. And we take a more sort of broader definition of sustainability. So we talk about financial sustainability, sustainability of energy, sustainability of community, as well as, climate sustainability. So we do very basic things. We tend to work online. We don't have an office. We don't have a big carbon footprint ourselves, and we encourage our members to, most of them take public transport anyway because they don't have cars. So just very kind of light touch, basic stuff that a tiny organisation would do. But interestingly, a lot of our members are interested in business, especially the Be Your Own Boss members, in businesses that address climate change, reuse, recycling, repurposing, sustainable transport, things like that. So we learn from our members about, and they teach each other about the qualities, the contributions, the steps that we can take towards addressing climate challenges and environmental sustainability. So we're kind of pretty basic as an organisation, but many of our members are taking active roots in the design of their business to address environmental sustainability challenges.
I mean, one of the things, I haven't said this for a while, but one of the things that you're missing there is your community focus. And, you're creating local businesses for local consumers in most cases, because they're small businesses. They're not necessarily going to be shipping around the world. And that sort of self-reliance, massively important. So like the resilience that you're building
I see, yes.
is a huge part of your climate contribution, but it's not something that immediately comes to mind, is it? Because you think, oh, right, don't fly, don't do this, change your light bulbs. But that's a massive contribution, like especially businesses, if they're filling a real niche and someone doesn't have to travel further to get whatever it is that they're selling or trading. So that's a big, big impact.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's always a good one to kind of have, in your back pocket.
Yes.
Like, oh, we also do this.
Yeah. We also build resilience. And but yeah, like I said, our definition of sustainability is a bit broader than just the environment. But no, that was well said. Thank you. That's definitely
it's hugely important part.
Yeah.
So, similar question here. Has Brexit changed anything for you?
Again, not really on the sort of the community, very sort of one-man band, one-woman band, kitchen table entrepreneur level. So our members tend not to be trading or exporting. I think the only thing that I would say that I've observed, and this is just as an observation, is one of the backlashes or one of the exacerbators and one of the results of Brexit has been legitimising
increasing racism generally.
Racist, anti-immigrant kind of thing. A lot of the people that we work with are new to the UK. And I think I detect that there's a wariness and built of experience of being prejudiced against by many of our members. From a personal point of view, my husband's economic migrant from Germany was, really very upset about Brexit and very sad that he's lived here for 40 years. That, his status has changed, his sense of being part of the UK has changed. But that was from a personal point of view. I think it's unleashed a negativity that was previously sort of dormant or hidden, or more dormant and more hidden, in terms of accepting who is part of our community. And I think that's been, I think Brexit was a driver for that.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to whip through these questions. I'm not going to dwell on that on this occasion. So where are we? We've done, social media. So I've seen your Instagram posts, plenty. It's the one post, but I've seen it a lot.
What Liza or Trust Leeds?
The Trust Leeds one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, what do you mean?
Yeah,
There's loads of she posts regularly on that, doesn't she?
I think it's because it's a boosted post and they keep just.
Do you get one of them keep coming on? How boring! I don't see that when I look at it. Oh, that's hilarious! I hadn't realised that. No, we get weekly posts on Instagram and Facebook every week.
Yeah, I'll have to actually look at the account rather than. Yeah.
It's actually managed by one of our members. We pay a small fee for her to do the Instagram and Facebook, which she managed to increase really exponentially. It's been wonderful because she does a really good job of that.
You need someone on it, don't you?
Oh God, it's so boring. But also, I promise I used to be an early adopter. I really did. I was like very early adopter. First person at university to have their own computer and the first person to have my phone.
Post every day on 15 platforms.
I do LinkedIn, but I really have to make myself do that. And I try to do one post a week on LinkedIn, but that's more of a personal thing. And for Trust Leeds, I tend to do more organisational things on the LinkedIn post, the Trust Leeds post. But our Facebook and Insta and increasingly TikTok is about our members. And so having a member who's in charge of that is really important. So, but it is important for that part of the community. It tends to be quite passive. We've got a lot of our coverage is growing, but the engagements are growing much slower. We get a lot of followers, a lot of lookers, but the engagements And mainly we engage with people on a face-to-face basis. But, as we develop and roll out our microfinance side, we need to be doing a bit more posting about that side of things to try to find new potential borrowers. And we do use Facebook for advertising for our Be Your Own Boss programme, because we're targeting what some would call unexpected entrepreneurs, or people who never call themselves entrepreneurs. And that the usual channels, we can't promote, obviously the startup managers do promote it for us, but we're not really aiming at people. And so we find Facebook advertising absolutely brilliant. Most of our members come through our random, obviously well-targeted Facebook campaigns, because they're not tuned into business support networks. Yeah. So that's how we tend to use it. What's your, okay, apart from thinking that we only have one post on Insta, what was your question about social media more broadly?
So, I mean, the question is generally how much time you have to spend on it, because more of us, like, no matter what your position is, you have to put posts out pretty much. And it's like, how much of that time is taken up, and do you feel that useful? Because a lot of people that started up, they're like, I'm posting all the time, I hate it, I don't know if it's working. Other people are like, I know what I'm doing, I get the results I want. So where do you kind of sit on that spectrum?
Well, I think we were quite good at the beginning to think about social, and I'm like, for what? Yeah. So it's like our website even, for what? And when we started, our website was really for stakeholders. It was so that other people and allies and potential funders and donors and supporters could see that we were real. And so it was designed for them. It's very wordy. It's got lots of, it's got an annual report on it. And actually now we're having a massive crisis of confidence about our website, because it's for other people now. So when you have to think, why are we doing it? That's why we did the website. Now our website needs to change because we've got different purposes and different targets. And with our social media, why are we doing it? Because we want our members to be part, to continue to feel part of what we do. We want to share our members' experiences. We want to encourage new people to become members, and we want to share the model and inspire other people and, be better connected in Leeds. That's great. So then you think, well, from an organisational point of view and from a kind of leadership, strategic partnership building point of view, LinkedIn. From a community self-reliant group members, sole traders point of view, Facebook. From a younger, Instagram for the sort of, and from a lot of our Be Your Own Boss members who are trading are using Instagram and TikTok for the sort of more the broader side of things. So why are we there? Because we want to spread the word about what we're doing. We want to showcase what we're doing. We want our members to have better exposure. And we want to justify to our donors and our funders that we're actually alive and we're doing things. So that's what drives the, why are we doing it? But the conversations we've had recently about our website, who is it for and why are we doing it, mean that it's a completely different system. We have to redo it. But I do one a week, and I'm really glad that we've been able to commission one of our members who is, really smart. She does a bit of volunteer work for us. She does a little bit of paid work for us. She's been a member of a group. She's done Be Your Own Boss. She's digitally savvy, and she's got members' voice. But it's just a total relief, because my brain doesn't really work in that way. It takes me ages to do a post as well on LinkedIn. It's like, and who have you got to @ and who have you got to hashtag and who have you got to remember and it just takes ages. So I'm not, and I actually, it was really only this year that I have understood when people are saying things like, social media can be bad for your mental health, or it can exacerbate. And I never really kind of got that. I always thought it's fine. You
haven't spent enough time on that.
But this year I've begun to, especially now that I've decided I've got to do a post a week on LinkedIn, I can see why.
The horror.
Yeah, I can see why. Sometimes I just thought, actually, it's not good for me. I'm comparing myself. I think, we're not doing this, we're not doing that. It's lovely when you can see good news. I'm only a kind of good news person, but I can see how it can be enervating. And I can see sometimes I think, well, actually, I'm just going to leave it for a bit for my own well-being as well as for Trust Leeds' well-being. It just becomes its own kind of self-serving machine, really. but it's important that we participate because we're part of this. But I can see why people go down rabbit holes, and I've occasionally gone down rabbit holes myself and found it very bad for me and not great for Trust Leeds. So I'm not I'm a why rather than you just get sucked into it.
Yeah, there's loads I could say on that, but I'm going to clip through the questions because the time's ticking away. But yeah, the amount of times I'll go on just to do a post, and then the first thing's something that's designed to grab my attention. You either ignore it straight away or you get sucked in and then you're like, what am I doing?
No, I have to be really careful. I don't get sucked into that.
So that's all the questions about our turbulent decade. So the next question is on change. Now, you, as the chief executive of Trust Leeds, you can make changes within reasons. So this can be difficult for people when they're the boss, because it's like you can make a lot of the changes. But if you could change any 3 things about your work, what would you change? And they can be realistic or, fantastic, however you want to take it.
I didn't think about this in advance, so let me just if I could change 3 things about what Trust Leeds does or what Trust Leeds needs or how we do it. I think the first one is, and I'm getting better at it, but it's really is just starting with the members first, so because like I said, we've done our establishment era, done the development era, we're now in our sharing era. And actually that's about sharing the power, sharing, we have our new boss network is being curated by members, not by me. So it's this era of sharing power, sharing decision-making, sharing ownership. I've been nurturing someone to co-manage and co-deliver our Be Your Own Boss program because I've done it 10 times now and actually other people can do it and she's brilliant. She can do it much better than I can. So I think that's we're now in the sharing era and remembering and trusting that there are our board members, our community self-reliant group members, our Be Your Own Boss members, our borrowers, remembering that they have so much to bring and they can take things on themselves and do it in ways that work for them and do it differently. I feel it's much easier to be a bit generous about change leadership when the idea comes from you. But I'm not in that era anymore. It's like I really trust what the people that we're working with do, say, think, feel, and letting them get on with it and letting other people pick up our model and manage it in a way that works for them. So it's that more of that relaxation around letting go of control and letting go of power, because over the last 6-7 years we've proved that people are perfectly able, entitled to, and can take and assume power and take it in wonderful places that we hadn't thought of. So that's the first thing. It's the sort of sharing of power and remembering and just enjoying it rather than worrying about it. I'd like to change. Then on the kind of more, something I do struggle with is the kind of the chucking out of the baby with the bathwater when it comes to regulation and compliance things. And like I said earlier, it's a very tiny charity, as the key member of staff, having to be the stamp fairy, the photocopier mender, the anti-money laundering person, the vulnerable adults person, the DPO, all of those different things, and we can do that and it's fine. But I just think that's the over-regulation and the over-concern about risk. And it's interesting because I'm a kind of feel the fear, oh boy do I, but do it anyway person. So, I'm great at doing risk assessments because I'm really good at imagining all the awful things that could happen, but I've got the courage to do it anyway. And I think a lot of us get so spooked by regulation compliance. And I mean GDPR. I also mean things like pronouns. I'm so scared of upsetting people that the vocabulary, using the right terminology, or whether it's in terms of gender or race or all of those things, we're so scared of getting it wrong. We're so scared of making mistakes that we don't do it. And so it is, yes, but all of those regulations and compliance and niceties and protocols and etiquette, they're valuable. Pronouns are really important. I'm not saying that they're not, but I'm saying let's do it and make a mistake rather than not do it because of fear of getting those things. And I wish that the balance was a little bit more generous of, obviously you've got to know your GDPR and you've got to do that correctly. But I just think that we're sort of, in worrying about risk so much, I think a lot of, it's difficult to not just go for it. And I've got this amazing board because we've got a real mixture of people on there. And as trustees and as company directors, being risk responsible and risk ready and risk thinking is really important. Yet they've all got courage as well. And it's a lovely thing to have that double combination. We understand that we're taking risks with our loans. We're taking with so many risks, and they have the courage themselves to have the burden of compliance and regulation and still have the courage to take those risks. But I think, generally in our work with our members, with our borrowers, feel a fear and do it anyway. I think that's something that we could all lighten up a little bit and be courageous in saying yes more than yes but or no because. Yeah. So that's the second thing I change. What did you think about that?
I was just going to say, I agree there, but I think the risk assessment thing that you were talking about, like, do a little bit of a risk assessment of it and then do it anyway.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Feel the fear. Do it. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Do all of that. Spook yourself and then still do it because you've worked out your mitigations.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Really, but don't not do it because it is high risk. Do it because you know it's high risk, you know why it's high risk, you know how you can mitigate, and on balance, is it worth it? Is it worth doing that? Yeah.
Being alive is high risk, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a
third thing?
Is that just two, change? Or is that?
What would I like to be changed?
You don't have to pick three.
I think that's all I can think of at the moment.
So the obvious ones that people don't really pick that often, unsurprisingly. But the obvious ones that you would think of for most people would be like more money, more time, like more growth, maybe bigger, more established, those kind of things. I can't think of the charity appropriate word, but business model, for want of a better term, is very individual focused. Like the person in front of you, physical, present, real people. So it's the difference between a classroom of 300 kids and a classroom of like 10. You can spend the time and you can really drill down into details and get depth and all that sort of stuff. So I would imagine you need to keep that. You want to keep that. It's a massive part of the design. So in terms of growth, it would be setting up another one that was doing the same thing. It would take time because you need to get it to the sort of benchmark level.
It's so true. This thing about impact. So what we've decided so far, based on our experience, but also the other charities and organisations that have shared their experiences with us, and also a bloody difficult funding climate for all sorts of reasons, we've decided that the best way to increase the number of people we work with is not by taking on more staff or having more offices or operating in different communities. The best way is by showing people what these three models can do and encouraging other people to adopt them into their work. So, yes, it would be nice to have more money, and yes, it would be, but we're very pragmatic and we're very self-reliant, and as a business, our growth model is based around, we've been here for 7 years, we've done so much in Leeds, and there are always going to be new people that we want to be supporting in Leeds. We're a West Yorkshire organisation as well, so now we want to make sure that our Be Your Own Boss programmes are are run in Bradford or Wakefield, or we get people from Bradford, Wakefield, because it's online, it's easier. So our growth is about other people and other organisations seeing the impact and the value of these three models, or one of these three models, or all of them, and incorporating that into their work. So they don't need to set up, you don't need to set up new institutions. You don't need to, so community anchor organisations can use the community self-reliant group model in their work. I've trained 100 people now. It's a 2-day training program in how to facilitate self-reliant groups. And then I'm here to listen and to help and to give them ideas and to share, so other people can run them themselves. Do you see what I mean? And with the microfinance, it's the same way. We've got all this work done, all this due diligence, all this governance done. But for the niche that we're serving is relatively small in Leeds. So let's go to West Yorkshire and let's see whether we can, the local authorities or like I said, the bigger anchor organisations can learn from us and make it happen cheaper and easier, because we've explained how you can do it. We're giving them the policies, the protocols, the systems, so that they can pick that up quite quickly and run that quite efficiently in their communities. So rather than them creating new organisations, they can adopt different elements, or one of the three or all three models, in their own way, and we can help them to do that. That way we increase the impact of our work, of these models, by mainstreaming it. So I think that's our growth plan, because the funding is difficult at the moment, and if we were looking at a consultancy model, for example, local authorities don't have money to consult other people, and small community charities certainly don't. Do you know what I mean? So let's just take the M word out of it. Let's take the money out of it and go back to the roots of charity and the values of our model, which is about learning together, saving, sharing, supporting each other. More than the total is more than the sum of the parts, and bartering and sharing and giving other people the experiences that we've got, so they can do it for themselves better and more where they are.
Cool. Final question from me. Are you familiar with universal basic income?
Yes, vaguely. Yeah. Yes, yeah.
So if there was a universal basic income, you can imagine whatever amount in your mind that is, but if it was in place, how do you think that might change your work?
Well, like all charities, one of our ambitions is that we don't actually need to exist anymore. So if the banks or the other CDFIs were lending to people that we're lending to, we wouldn't need to lend to them. And I think that the high street banks are getting very interested in the work of community development financial institutions and partnering with them. So it may be that one day microfinance banks will get out of bed for a 50 quid loan or £1,000 loan to somebody with a poor credit score. So hopefully, we won't need to exist. With the self-reliant group model, we have many, especially in Leeds, anchor organisations who are beginning to use that model in their own way. So, and they're perpetuating it. So we don't need to exist anymore. And then the Be Your Own Boss programme, especially that programme in particular, because it's definitely packageable, helping other people, because it's the contents, but it's actually the gold dust of why Be Your Own Boss works is because it's collegiate, because it's collaborative, because it's got role models, it's delivered by people who've been there themselves. And if we can help other people to set up their own, we've done all the plans and the diagrams and the policies and the whatevers, then people can do that really quickly themselves. So that's so, in a way, with universal income, I think the model, in fact, the needs will probably still be there a bit, because people will still want to have a purpose. I think it's a great idea. A lot of people that we work with have so much to contribute through their volunteering, through their community work, in very often very informal ways rather than very formalised ways. And so I think within that concept of universal basic income, the need for and the interest in a group of people getting together with a shared community of need, with a supported with a bit of an infrastructure and a way of working together, and a group agreement and a system that will help them to achieve things that they want to achieve in purpose, whether that's work or volunteering or doing something for their community or doing something for their families. We'll still need these constructs like self-reliant groups within the universal basic income to give people purpose and hope and pride and a sense of belonging and a sense of being part of something.
The sense of being a person.
Yeah.
Belonging
and valid
to something.
Yeah, and having something to offer, and realising, like all of us do.
I'm trying to think how I'm phrasing this, but like, not necessarily you have to produce something, but you are of value because you belong, like that is...
Yeah. There's always
that
a role.
is a contribution.
Yeah. There's always a role. There's always something that you can offer. And the purpose of the group is to find that in each person. So I think it's a really interesting concept. I think if we wanted it to, we could make it work. Absolutely. And I think the future of the work, has got to change. And it's a really interesting one with this government and previous governments trying to get people into work when the world of working is changing exponentially fast because of AI, because of all these other considerations. And actually, I would suggest that it's about helping people to find their purpose.
Yeah.
More than finding a job.
The why?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, everyone's got to work all the time. Why?
Yeah.
What for?
Is there work? We need to need to feel useful. We need to feel part of something. We need to have value, and that doesn't have to be a job. It can, and I think self-reliant groups are a really good way for people who are unemployed to find those things. And even if we had universal basic income, people would still need to have purpose and to be part of something and to feel that they're contributing. So I don't think it changes our role that much. Although I would love it if Trust Leeds wasn't needed anymore. I think that would be utopia, because we wouldn't need to exist. Yeah,
that's the ideal. Is there anything that we've missed, or anything that you want to revisit, or anything that I've not touched on that you want to talk about, or if there's anything that you want to I want to shout about this, feel free. But before we do that, do you know all the socials? I will put everything in the show notes.
I emailed it over to you, so you've got those. Yeah.
But what's the best place for people to contact you? Is it LinkedIn? I
think the best place, we've got a contact me on our website, so a contact form on the website, and there's a phone number on our website as well. So phone, send an email. We really like hearing from people who are interested in joining, partnering, finding out more.
Donoring.
Yeah, exactly. People who want to, because we need money to do this, and the more money we have, the more we can do of it, and the less money we have, the less we can do. But actually, it doesn't mean that we don't do it, and we're very lean, and we're very local, and we're philanthropically funded. So all of those things really help.
Thank you again to Liza for being my guest. Thanks as always to all my guests, and thank you to you, Leeds, for being my subject. You can find out more about Liza's work at www.trustleeds.org.uk, and you can go check out information about Mohammed Yunus. I have put the link in the show notes, as well as links to Purple Shoots and Weevolution, which were both discussed in this interview. So we're nearly there, folks. Just 6 episodes left to go. Who will they be? What will they say? Well, I know what the next 2 are, but after that, your guess is as good as mine. Join me next time for another look at a different kind of financial support work with Mr. Salim Shafi, which will be out soon. Keep following the socials and you will know when it drops. I'll just do some notifications before I sign off. I have now posted the prices for paid episodes of Working Hours onto the website. I'll put the link to the page in the show notes of this episode. There will be discounts available for some roles and sectors. I'll post about that as soon as I have settled on what they will be. If you haven't done so already, then sign up to the Working Hours newsletter. There's life for Working Hours after the 200 free episodes target is reached. I'm not done with this yet. I just can't do this bloody editing and admin for free anymore. I'm going to have to send out invites to reach the 200 goal because everyone is just far too distracted to send me an email and be on the show. I guess people just like to say no to you actively. Passively doesn't cut it for them. Don't forget, there's nothing to stop you from supporting this project and this show financially right now. Go to Patreon, patreon.com/workinghourspod. Memberships from £6 a month, and for every £250 paid into Patreon, a new episode of Working Hours will be made. Can't commit to £6 a month? I know I couldn't. Then you can give any amount that you can spare towards making new Working Hours episodes via Ko-fi. That's ko-fi.com/working hours. Okay, in other podcast news, I did my first teaching gig down at Swarthmore Education Centre last month with my Introduction to Podcasting workshop. Thanks to those that came along, I'm hoping for a full class for the next one and also to have a tighter format and much better delivery from me than the last time. It went well last time, but it was just very loosey-goosey. Workshop attendance is limited to 8, and we need at least 3 people to run it. So don't assume that it will either A, run, or B, sell out without you buying any tickets for it. This isn't radio. You're likely the only person on earth listening to this right now. It's £25 and it's going to be on the 27th of June. Tickets will be available to buy from Eventbrite very soon. If you'd like to contact me about being on this show or about anything that happened in this episode or anything at all working hours related, you can email me about this show at workinghourspod@western-studios.com. Okay, that's me. Remember, listener, no matter what you do, it's impossible for you to understand anything that your salary depends on you not understanding. So try to work for peace and try to plan with kindness. Raise your voice, but reduce your impact. Cheers, ears. Take care out there and be kind to each other, Leeds. Thanks for listening. Oh, and if you enjoyed this episode, why don't you share it with someone else who you think might get something from it? Thanks. Working Hours is produced, recorded, edited, created and published by Simon Treen for Western Studios Leeds Limited. The music was The Bees from Chopin's Etudes, which is in the public domain and was taken from museopen.org. Remember, Western Studios Leeds Limited when you're ready to start making your content in West Yorkshire. Follow Western Studios Leeds on Facebook, facebook.com/Western_Studios_Leeds, and on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/company/Western-Studios. Bookmark western-studios.com so you can see the latest prices and use my contact page to drop me a message about your own podcast project or working hours at any time from anywhere. Maybe you want or need a podcast host, co-host or narrator for your podcast project. Maybe you just need another voice for one or more episodes of your show. Podcasts are so much more than gossip, book promotions and marketing for online courses. Podcasts and other audio content get your online brand out there. Want to make some fundraising case studies? Want to have an audiobook or video course? Want to share your learning, knowledge and expertise in your field? Want to learn, teach or raise awareness of something general or particular? Want to improve internal comms with messages your staff might actually engage with? Or do you just want to brighten up the world with some entertaining content? Then make a podcast. If you're making your podcast within West Yorkshire, then think about making it with western-studios.com. Whatever your podcast questions or needs, get in touch with Western Studios Leeds.